The NBA and the NFL have been involved in a lot of scheduling conflicts over the years, which isn't too surprising, seeing as the seasons overlap. And sometimes, things happen that make it tricky for both leagues to have their moment in that respective city. However, 99% of the time, the NFL wins. Especially if it's the NFL playoffs going up against an NBA regular season game, the NFL is going to come out on top and force the NBA's hand. We saw that happen to some extent during this game right here that you've been watching, as in 1985, the New York Jets played the wild card round of the playoffs against the New England Patriots on the same day that the New Jersey Nets were supposed to play a game. Because the Jets and the Nets share the same parking facility, and because traffic in and out would have been an absolute nightmare, and because no one would have attended the Nets game otherwise because of all the commotion, and the fact that a person who had tickets to both games as a fan of both the Jets and the Nets would absolutely choose the Jets playoff game, the Nets had to move their game to an unreasonably late hour, as in a time on the East Coast when not a single Nets home game would start today, or any game for that matter. You can learn more about that bizarre incident and how the Jets making the playoffs screw the Nets over by clicking the card in the upper right corner. A decade after that, we saw it happen in January of 1996 during this game right here, when the Green Bay Packers took on the Carolina Panthers in the NFC Championship for the right to go to Super Bowl 31 down in New Orleans. No, Green Bay does not have an NBA team, but Milwaukee does, and the Bucks were scheduled to play a game in the afternoon, which would have interfered in some capacity with the Packers. And there were a bunch of Packers fans living in Milwaukee, which made sense, seeing as the Packers played there for half a century, and seeing as it's the closest major city to Green Bay, only being a roughly 2-hour drive. So the Bucks decided, in the interest of not screwing over their fans who might have wanted to see the Packers play or drive down to the game and come back, and in the interest of getting revenue, because people otherwise likely would not show up to their home game at the same time as the Packers game, to push their game back on Sunday night, allowing fans to participate in the best of both worlds and watch both the Packers and the Bucks play. You can learn more about that by clicking the card in the upper right corner. So I've done quite a few stories thus far on the NBA having to step aside for the NFL and their playoff-related activities, because something came up in the schedule that forced the NBA to be the second fiddle. And we have another one of these instances for you today with this game right here, as in the 2004 NFC Championship between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Atlanta Falcons. However, while I can't exactly blame the NBA for the conflict that happened in the other two instances that I previously talked about, I absolutely can put some of the blame on the league here. And you'll see why when I break down the easily avoidable conflict that the NBA completely screwed up on, screwing over many teams in the process. Because this is the story behind the absolute disaster at the 2004 NFC Championship, and the chaos that came from the Philadelphia 76ers having a home game at the same time as the Eagles playing one of their biggest games in franchise history. Make sure you hit that like button down below, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single video that we post on the channel, because we post every single day on here about the weird and the wacky history of the NFL, with stories like this one that you might not have heard of before. So if you like that sort of stuff, then this is definitely the place for you. Thanks in advance for liking and subscribing and for helping this community out. And with that in mind, let's talk about the time that the Eagles flying meant that the Sixers were dying. Before I talk about the incident in question, we need some context to understand what the original game plan was for this game right here involving the Philadelphia 76ers. When the NBA schedule was released for the 2004-05 season, the 76ers were set to host the Miami Heat on Sunday, January 23rd. This was going to be the first time that the Heat were playing the 76ers in Philadelphia this season, and was on paper going to be a chance for the Heat to get the monkey off of their back of not being able to win in Philly. Despite the fact that the Heat were significantly better than the 76ers in the 2003-2004 season, the Sixers won both of the matchups between the teams in Philly by double digits. And the same thing applied during the 2002-03 season, when the 76ers swept the Heat in the games played at the Wachovia Center. In fact, the last time the Heat won a game at the Wachovia Center was all the way back on March 20th, 2002, meaning that the Sixers, on their home floor, had the upper hand against the Heat in recent years. And seeing as the 76ers were entering this game against the Heat, hovering right around 500, meaning to go on a run in order to sneak into the playoffs, this game was set to have massive implications. However, as big as the implications for this regular season game between the Heat and the 76ers were, they paled in comparison to the other game taking place in Philadelphia on Sunday, January 23rd. And that game, as you might have been able to guess, was this game right here, as in the NFC Championship between the Atlanta Falcons and the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles in the NFC Championship went together like peanut butter and jelly back in the early 2000s. However, the Eagles in actually winning the NFC Championship went together like peanut butter and poison. In each of the past 3 seasons, the Eagles played in the NFC Championship and lost, losing to the Rams in the 2001 season, the Buccaneers in the 2002 season, and the Panthers in the 2003 season. But if the Eagles could get the monkey off of their back and win this one, they'd be going to their 2nd Super Bowl in franchise history. This felt like the year to do it too. The Eagles were head and shoulders above every other team in the NFC that season, with the Atlanta Falcons being, statistically speaking, one of the worst number 2 seeds of all time. The Eagles won their division by 7 games, and it could have been more if they hadn't wrapped up the number 1 seed after the first 14 games and rested a lot of their starters for the final 2 weeks. As with their starters out there, they were 13-1 through 14 games. The Eagles have the best record in the conference by multiple games, to the point where it wasn't a competition for who the best team in the conference was, and it hadn't been for quite some time. In just about every metric, the Eagles were a better team than the Falcons, and there's a reason that the Eagles entered this game as heavy favorites. It was the Eagles in a tier of their own, and the Eagles might truly be one of the most dominant regular season teams of all time, especially in comparison to the other teams in their conference, because truly, no one came close. And already, you might be able to notice the problem here. The Philadelphia 76ers are playing at the Wachovia Center in Philadelphia in the same sporting complex on January 23rd, as they're playing game number 40 of an 82-game regular season. The Philadelphia Eagles are playing at Lincoln Financial Field in the same sporting complex on January 23rd, as they're playing for the right to go to the Super Bowl. And the NBA realized that this was going to be a big problem. It was going to be a massive problem. Because I don't think I need to tell you that no one, not a single soul, would be at that 76ers game or watching that Sixers game. The issue wasn't the fact that they were in the same sporting complex. There have been plenty of instances where the Eagles played a game at the same time as another team in the area, whether it was the Phillies, Flyers, or the 76ers. Philadelphia fans might remember a few years ago when there was an event taking place at the arena, with the Philadelphia Flyers playing a game. There was an event at the ballpark where the Philadelphia Phillies were in the playoffs, and there was an event at the stadium where Mexico was taking on Germany in a soccer match. Having 2 or 3 events in the same complex would be an issue for a lot of cities from a parking and a traffic perspective. There is a reason the Steelers and Pirates never played home on the same day, for example. Same thing with the Reds and the Bengals. Philadelphia, at least when it came to 2 events in the same complex, is not one of those cities. So that wasn't the issue. It wasn't like what we saw 2 decades before with the Jets and the Nets. Theoretically, you could have played the game at the same time. Rather, this was just a matter of practicality. Going head-to-head against the NFL in the same city as the NFC Championship is a really bad idea. And to this, I say that the NBA was being absolutely moronic and in no foresight whatsoever, to the point where this is one of the dumbest scheduling blunders of all time. There are some things that are unavoidable. Believe me, I get it. What happened in 1985 with the Nets was unforeseen. The Jets had not made the playoffs each of the past 2 seasons. If there was an NBA team in Jacksonville and they played on NFC Championship Sunday and the Jacksonville Jaguars went from 4-13 to hosting the conference title game, that's unforeseen. But this, whoever was making the NBA schedule was drunk when they didn't realize that this was a possibility. The Philadelphia Eagles were synonymous with the NFC Championship. They made it to that game in each of the past 3 seasons and literally hosted it in each of the past 2 seasons. I don't think it's unreasonable to expect the possibility that the Eagles could host it again, especially when they enter the season as the favorites to win the Super Bowl and the consensus favorites to come out of the NFC. It was basically Philly against the field heading into the 2004 season. If something happens 2 years in a row and you don't plan on it for the possibility that it happens a third time, that's on you at that point. Scheduling something in Kansas City in January of 2019 because you didn't think the Chiefs had a chance at playing in the conference championship, seeing as they hadn't played in it since 1993, and no one knew how good Patrick Mahomes was going to be, perfectly reasonable. Scheduling something in Kansas City in January of 2025 because you didn't think that, despite years and years of history suggesting otherwise, you're a certified moron at that point. Logistically, the Sixers game was possible. So here's an idea. If you never had any intention of playing any game in a city where the conference championship could be held, then don't schedule any games for that Sunday in any city that has an NFL team. And especially don't schedule one in the city that makes it every year and is the literal favorite to do it again, especially when you can play your games on any day of the week. Doesn't seem like a complex solution here. But what about the conflict, not necessarily with the NFL in the game that you've been watching this entire time, but the conflict with the other tenants in the arena? Remember, the 76ers were not the only team that used the arena, and sometimes you have to work around a schedule of other tenants. And to be fair, the 76ers share the arena with the Philadelphia Flyers of the NHL. And to be fair to the Sixers, the Flyers have been playing great hockey. They hadn't allowed a goal all season. They hadn't lost a game since May, and they were tied for first in the league. So if they had priority over the Sixers, and this was all that the Sixers could muster up, I get it. Of course, the reason they hadn't allowed a goal all season was because, oh yeah, there was no NHL season. The league was locked out. The entire season was a wash. There was no hockey. The Sixers had to compete with, quite literally, no one for the rights to the Wachovia Center. They could have played the games whenever they wanted to. The NBA had a cakewalk of a schedule when it came to creating it and scheduling it around conflicts, seeing as their biggest competitor for events and arenas from a practicality standpoint was not around. And somehow, they fumbled the bag. And even if we take this game right here out of the equation and take the NFC Championship out of it, this schedule was still really freaking stupid. Because you might be saying, well, why not play the Sixers game earlier? Instead of playing the Sixers game at 6, have the Sixers play at noon. The Eagles play at 3, and everyone's happy. Well, you couldn't do that. Because on Saturday, January 22nd, the literal night before that scheduled game between the 76ers and the Heat, the Sixers were down in Orlando to take on the Magic. Yeah, the Sixers were playing a Florida team on the road before playing a Florida team at home the very next day, playing a back-to-back at 2 different arenas that are more than 2.5 hours apart from each other by plane, meaning that the Sixers wouldn't even arrive back home until well past midnight. Did the NBA not realize that it snows in January and that there could be inclement weather and flying could be very tough when they decided to give teams back-to-backs in the heart of January and have a team trying to fly back to the Northeast? Nothing about this schedule, I truly mean it, made any sense from the NBA's perspective. And you couldn't play the game later that night, let's say 8:30 or 9 o'clock at night, because the Heat had to travel on the road the very next night, and they had to play a game on Monday. This schedule made no sense from a practicality standpoint, it made no sense from a logistical standpoint, and made no sense from the standpoint of trying to avoid the NFL. They could have done, quite literally, anything else, and it would have yielded better results than whatever the heck this mess was, where you have no flexibility to move the game because the team is playing in a completely different part of the country the night before. But you have to move the game because you don't want to compete against the NFL, even though you're doing this in the city that has the best chance at hosting a game that day. Genius strategy, guys. Absolutely genius. Job well done across the board. The Eagles won the NFC Championship by a final score of 27-10 to advance to their second Super Bowl in franchise history. And finally, after 3 straight defeats in that round in the previous 3 years, get the monkey off of their back. But what about this 76ers Heat game right here? Whatever happened to this? Well, the game got moved to Monday night, getting pushed back a day from Sunday, January 23rd, to Monday, January 24th. And that was an issue because the Miami Heat were supposed to play the New Orleans Hornets at home on January 24th. But obviously, that couldn't happen now. So that game got moved to Sunday, January 23rd. All because the NBA had no idea that the Eagles were going to be a good football team, despite the Eagles having the literal best odds of any team to make it to the Super Bowl. It's like if you had no idea that the Los Angeles Dodgers were going to be a good baseball team this year, and you planned things poorly because of it. That's on you. That's entirely on you and your incompetence that you've managed to now successfully screw over not 1, not 2, but 3 teams. You screw the Sixers over and the people that had tickets to that game, you screw Heat fans over and the people that had tickets to Monday's game, and you screw Hornets over in the process and their fans. How the New Orleans Hornets, who didn't even play in Philadelphia that weekend, got screwed by the Philadelphia Eagles playing in the NFC Championship, as in a team in a completely different league, in a completely different sport, in a city in a completely different time zone, is kind of fascinating. But the NBA found a way to do it. It would almost be like if today the Chicago Bulls got screwed over because of something that the New York Giants did. Oh, and the 76ers won the rescheduled game 106-98. Because of course they did. Because Allen Iverson had 45 points and 10 assists and was amazing with one of his best games ever as a pro. AI truly was something special. If only the NBA had AI to help them create the schedule to prevent this mess. Although to be fair, a human could have looked at this and realized the problem in 5 seconds if they were competent enough. The whole saga involving having to get moved to a different date, and in return, forcing another game to get moved involving 2 completely different teams, is fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. I think I've hammered the point home enough that this was not just insanely poor planning and foresight, but hilariously bad planning and foresight, to the point where anyone with a brain could have looked at this and seen the problem right away. Today, the NBA tries to avoid Conference Championship Sunday whenever possible, unless it's in cities that do not have NFL teams. During the 2024-2025 season, there was only one game to take place on Sunday, January 26th, and that was the game between the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Portland Trail Blazers, 2 teams that play in cities unoccupied by the NFL. Maybe the NBA learned its lesson from that catastrophe 2 decades ago. Because on this January day in 2005, when it came to the possibility of playing the game as scheduled and having everything go off without a hitch, the 76ers were more like the 86ers, as in, we need to 86 this game. Check out our live streaming schedule for the next few days. We're live every single day on this channel, whether we're covering a sporting event or playing GeoGuessr or just taking your requests. So make sure you like and subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single time that we go live and so that you can join this community. Also, thanks to all our members and our Patreon supporters who get exclusive perks like their name at the end of each video, members-only Q&A streams, and cool emojis to use on videos and during streams. See how you can join this community and become a member or a Patreon member by clicking the link in the description below.